before the panelists introduce themselves and we get to know them, I think why we're here today is very simple. It's a very simple thesis, not a provocative one, I should say, because it challenges the normal way of thinking. It challenges us to be a little different because we're talking about rights-based stewardship versus commodity carbon. So does it always have to be commodity carbon? Why can it not be a rights-based stewardship model where locals and IPLCs and others can benefit? That is one. The other thing is, legally, in many of these regions there are existing legal mechanisms and instruments. But many of these are not capitalized upon. Many of these stay on paper as it is. And although they grant certain powers and certain vetoes and whatnot to the communities, it does not get used. And therefore, because of that, the markets ultimately find ways to circumvent the governments and go and do directly as what we want to do. For example, there are a number of carbon projects that is already happening in Nagaland. The state government is least aware about it. The local people are the only ones who know about it, and within the local people, again, it's just a few selected individuals who know about it. And these are the challenges that are happening. So today we have 5 distinguished panelists, all very rich and all very with a whole bunch of experience from their own perspectives. And I think the way for us here is about not just looking at problems, but about how do we go forward in terms of doing something that can be achieved. So this is a forward-looking session and not just a problem dumping session. And before we actually get into it, I would like us to start with Athena. Would you tell us who you are and what brings you here to this panel with regard to this? So in about 2 minutes, if you can do that.
Yeah. I'm Athena. I'm working with Railway Captains Association, which is a little different from RNPA because we're in Nagaland. We're working with a very small group of churches, but we cover the whole district of Karen, a little bit Islamic district, and what goes. And as we're working with the tribal people, any kind of livelihood, the tribal people talks about women, land, and the ecosystem that is around. So this is very much relevant to us. And in fact, I am a walking ecosystem. Let me take 1 more minute.
Please.
Yeah, I am wearing
the ecosystem deserves all the time.
Yeah, the necklace that is depicting hornbill. And here the embroidery that is done is the pigeon eye. And the necklace I'm wearing is from the wild banana seeds. I talk a little differently because I've come to a place called Temelong. Z and Z is a problem for me. It means to say that I've come to a particular ecosystem. So I'm a walking ecosystem. Yeah, thank you so much. I represent that.
So when you say wrong way, I think it's a tribe that she represents. So she's from a frontal organization of the tribe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hello everyone, I'm Satish Gupta. I'm the founder and director of an organization called CGEM, Center for Grower-Centric Economic Analysis. It's a Section 8 non-for-profit company dedicated to make sure communities do not lose out in carbon markets. So we support, advise, educate, negotiate for the communities and on their behalf. It has been 3.5 years with us, and we visited the grace of our host in Manipur, Meghalaya, Assam, to see how these communities can also empower.
Thank you very much.
I'm Tim Romay. I'm currently the Executive Director of R&D, which is Framework Nature-Based Lecture. We mostly work around the livelihood, which is nature-based solution. That's how our work linked to human rights and also climate change. And we thought that this session will help not only our work in Manipur but also Northeast, as the market carbon, existing carbon market force is coming in a very big way. So thank you so much for coming in.
Nibong is also the host of this session, and he and his team conceptualized this whole session. So thank you very much for having us.
Hello, Namaste. My name is Ramesh, and I'm a part of a movement called Ekta Parishan, which is a land rights movement, mainly in the central and the central-eastern part of India. We are largely working to secure land to the landless community, people, pastoral community, which co-provides, etc., in different parts of India. Why I'm here, because this session is extremely important. When I went with Imam and he informed me about the session, I don't know for what reason he invited me to be a panelist here. I'm not an expert of the carbon market at all. But one thing which always strikes me in my mind, that where are the indigenous people's contribution in the NDCs? Right? We have our climate action plan. Where are the indigenous people's contribution mentioned in the climate action plan? Not at all. Where are the indigenous people's contributions or their role is actually mentioned in the IDCs? Nowhere, right? So, in the absence of this kind of an institutional safeguard or institutional framework, we are largely dependent on the schemes, I call it as scams, which is related around the carbon market. So, I'm going to talk about something which actually provoked me to be a part of this session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Wang Xiao. I teach in the law faculty, DU. I have been associated with the IMPC. It's now the third or fourth year I guess. Pranab sir has been inviting me every year, and I'm very happy that he keeps on inviting me, and I don't miss out any of the invitation. I mostly teach environmental law, constitutional law, and administrative law subjects. I'm focusing my research on customary laws and environmental laws. That's it.
Thank you very much. So, as you can see, we have a really distinguished panel, a panel that represents a generous focus, a panel which has the practitioner's focus as in Ilgong, somebody that has the people's movement's perspective, somebody that has the legal perspective, and of course, we have somebody who facilitates and ensures that communities are not disempowered and do not miss out on the whole process. So that is what it is. Now, as a first round, and I'm very glad that we're on time, we hardly spent 12 minutes in all these introductions and blah, blah, blah. So we have almost an hour, 60 minutes, because we have to make sure that we don't eat into the other sessions time, and I think that's very important. So let's get straight to the talk, as they say. And this round would be like, what works on the ground? You know, carbon market is there, everything is there, but what actually works in the ground? What is this faces to evidence sort of a perspective we want to hear? And given that Dingong is not only the host, but also the idea came up from him, we would like to start with him in terms of like, and I'm getting straight to the issue. I'm not going to ask you backgrounds and whatnot. Dingong, looking at financing mechanisms, you know, what long-term financing mechanism and value-added addition hubs, for example, are best sustained, or can best women and youth sustain themselves, that is based on a forest-based livelihood? What sort of mechanisms can you think about? And why are they better than a carbon credit project, or why are they better than the usual market-linked projects?
Thank you, Omar. Just before going to that financial option quickly, I just want to mention that all of us aware that climate change is real, and this has to be mitigated. This is the larger picture, this is a larger issue that we all agree on. But while doing so, there are so many complicated things going on. And in that, I just want to remind all of us here that there is thing in system thinking perspective. Just taking simplest analogy like driving a vehicle. Clutch to shift gear, brake to stop the vehicle, and accelerator to accelerate the vehicle. If you want to stop the vehicle, you have to put the brake. Otherwise, the vehicle will never stop. Similarly, the carbon market mechanism, whatever solutions that people are talking about, if we are not really connected to the natural law, which is the ecosystem and also the social systems, that is systematically, happening. It won't happen. So you may say something, I may say something, but if you don't apply the system thinking lens, I think things will not work. It's something that I just want to mention. Quickly, the existing carbon market mechanism, which is 6.2 and 6.4 article, there are few challenges there. One is that these carbon markets create inequity. The project developer, the certifiers and brokers. Here, to my information, 70 to 90% revenue profit is linked to that, and the community will get only 5 to 10% is one. Second is the carbon markets host land grabbing. Once you traded a patch of forest, you are not allowing the community to enter in that forest. It's like land grabbing. It's another issue. Then integrity problems, baseline manipulation, leakages, then non-performance, double counting, and all of this is also happening. Then lack of now in carbon market commodification of only carbon. What about the rest? Indigenous culture, sovereignty, ecosystem, all these values, where are they counted? So these are some of the challenges, and that's why in Article 6.8, if I am not wrong, that alternate financing mechanism is also discussed, and that's where we are coming. This particular session is conceptualized based on that. Now, in that, nature-based and biodiversity finance is something that people are talking about, even in COPs, it is being discussed. In that, biodiversity credits is something that we can also think about. In Austria, in Costa Rica, EU, they are thinking for exploring for this kind of. And then, ecosystem payments, payment for ecosystem services. Like, again, in Costa Rica, the PES model has been there. In China, they have started doing this based on watershed protection, soil conservation, pollination, cultural services. So for this kind of thing, they have put certain kind of accounting systems for this kind of diversity. Now, I do not want to mention particular maybe like the name of funding mechanism can be different, but people are using different, like Forest Stewardship Fund. This is being used by Brazil, Indonesia, and Colombia. Then Indigenous Guardian Program in Canada and Australia, they are doing this. Territorial Climate Funds in Amazon Basin territories, they are calling name of this fund, alternative fund. Then Community Resilient Funds, which is Pacific Islands, Nepal, in Kenya, they are calling. In Northeast, we may name something else. I don't know. All of us agreed to call something, but the whole idea is, instead of doing, yesterday also we discussed a lot about carbon market. In Philippines, in other things, they face a lot of problems. And in India, it is quite challenging. Now, if you talk about carbon market mechanism, the law should not be just forest and environment. We need to take into tribal affairs, minority affairs, all this should come together. But where is that law? There are so many, Dr. Mohapasi will talk about legal provisions, but which does not specifically mention about FPs, in India. So with all this, why don't you trust our indigenous? Because wherever you go across the globe, indigenous people are there, forest will be there. So with that, I think we should just trust and do towards that will be simpler in the context of Northeast and also in India, which is something I want to do for now.
Thank you very much. I think he has made the context very well, starting from the Paris Agreement all the way down to the issue of ensuring that local peoples and communities are trusted. They have proved themselves, and yet we still don't trust them. I think that is the big challenge that we have. And to now move on to a larger issue of the whole perspective of these markets, I would like to talk to Rameshji. And the question for Rameshji is, what single epistemic mismatch between indigenous governance and market-based carbon projects have you seen that have shrunk community rights, especially land rights, and decision-making powers of the
Thanks. I think the one most important factor, what we observe in the central part of India is a structural contradictions between the existing law and the constitutional provision vis-a-vis the whole carbon market logic. And I have some specific examples. So let's try to understand what are the apprentices of the structural contradictions. The first one, because the whole carbon market concept is based on the marketization of land and erosion of constitutional resources. Take 5th and 6th scheduled constitutional provision. I call it a pact. It's not just a provision or a safeguard. So there was a pact soon after the independence, and the whole carbon market logic is a complete institutional bypass of those provisions. So this is the first very, very important factor, how the carbon market is actually overruling the constitutional ethos actually. In the very basic role of the whole carbon market, which are the institutions which actually are responsible to execute these schemes or to execute the plans on the ground. And as you rightly mentioned, that the land and the tribal department is totally bypassed. In Manipur, in Mizoram and in Nagaland, the forest department is responsible. In the Meghalaya, Basic Development Authority is responsible for this, all carbon projects. And which actually is responsible also to institutionalize the existing schemes. But here, my question is that the forest department was the one who has a legacy of alienation of tribal community, indigenous people, because of the colonial forest law in the past. You can take the example of Northeast, you can take the example of central part of India. So how can we rely on the same institution which was institutionally and by design anti-tribal, right? And why this forest department is actually given as a nodal position to execute all these schemes. So this was our first observation which actually emerged where are the constitutional or the structural contradictions actually exist. And now they are championing the whole green economy project. So why they are too much rely on the forest department? Forest department is also known in the past to promote the commercial logging, monoculture plantation and the deforestation. And to larger extent, these were the projects which actually disposes the indigenous people from their native land. So historically, there is a huge amount of evidence which is already there on the ground. And in spite of all these bad sins, if the forest department is in the nodal position, if they are in the driving seat, as per your example, then I think definitely vehicle is moving in the wrong direction. The third, can we believe in the environment department? Because if you see the overall design, which department, I mean, if you see the central government architecture, the Ministry of Power is responsible for designing the whole carbon market thing. Not Ministry of Agriculture, not Ministry of Horticulture, not even Ministry of Forest or the Climate Department or the Environment Department. And even within the Ministry of Power, there is a Bureau of Energy Efficiency, where all energy engineers are sitting there. So if they design, if they devise this kind of project for execution on the ground, that means again it's a fundamental challenge in the whole argument what we are asking for. For me, the second is that whole carbon market logic is a new form of resource colonization. It's a new phase of ecological colonization because in the whole framework of the carbon market, the larger beneficiaries, the first beneficiaries I would say are the private firms, the state agencies and the carbon brokers, not the indigenous people on the ground. Because as you rightly mentioned, if you see the proportional, I mean I keep talking about the quantification of benefits. Even I don't believe in the word called beneficiary. But even if you look at their own market logic, where are the robust mechanisms to understand the whole quantification of benefits method? And I have a very specific example of Jharkhand. In the Jharkhand, there is a scheme called Birsa Harit Gram Yojana. This is a state-sponsored scheme. If you go deeper and you understand what is the Birsa Harit Scheme Yojana, it's actually allow the community to start commercial plantation of fruit trees in the so-called barren land or fallow land, and they provide 60,000 rupees over a period of 20 years. If you just go deeper and to understand 60,000 rupees over 20 years, you may shock that the per day income or per month income is nothing. Right? Even the Manrega Mazdoori is more than this kind of a scheme. So there are some fundamental challenges within this whole system of carbon logic. The last thing I would like to mention here is that the whole resource governance, because the way carbon markets aggressively moving on the ground, I want to say they are creating an irreversible damage on the ground. The way the whole commercial plantation is actually occupying the space of the primary forest. For the indigenous people, primary forest is more important. Dingdong knows that which kind of trees are important in the Nagaland or in the Manipur, not the people who are sitting in the Delhi or in Bhopal, right? So the whole logic of commercial plantation is actually overruling the primary forest logic, which has spiritual meaning, constitutional meaning, and the meaning in terms of the land and forest for the indigenous people. So let me stop here and thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Ramesh ji has very well touched upon the foundational issues, especially when he talks about the constitutional ethos being overruled, or about the whole issue of our carbon markets, another form of ecological colonization. I think that's a big question we have in mind. And to do that, and when we're trying to address such issues, we have Rajesh here, who has a company that works with such both sides of the line. He works with both sides of the fence, and they have tools and whatever methodologies they have, and I'm sure we'll get to know more. And when I ask, what I want to therefore know from Rajesh is, now let's imagine that a big green carbon project comes to a community, okay? And we have heard this problem that what carbon projects bring. Now, how can a community institution, a Gram Sabha or a village council, how can they practically use your decision tree and 6-point term sheet, and please explain what that is also a little bit, to reject or force full protection of their customary law and food systems using this tool that you have developed? Can you explain a little bit about it? Because I think this is very important for communities to know what is the defense mechanism they have against such projects.
Thank you so much for that question, and thank you so much for the previous analyst also. I think you said that one day we will. Just to first talk about the 6-point term sheet. The 6-point term sheet is not something that we